In this session, we will be featuring 3 speakers, 2 of which we have already met earlier, representatives from JLand, from JCorp and IRDA. Sitting with them on the panel today is a very special guest speaker who is no stranger in the property sector, Miss Amy Wong. Miss Amy Wong is the Executive Director, Real Estate Research and Consultancy at Knight Frank, headquartered here in Kuala Lumpur. The topic of discussion for this panel session would be touching on both JLand and IRDA's earlier outlook, but not only that, in this session, the audience will be able to get an insight from Miss Amy on Knight Frank's view on the HSR project, as well as how the property landscape will change in KL and Johor in the long run. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome back on our moderators once again, Ms. Loong Kok Wen and Encik Adam Muhammad Rahim to lead the panel session. Over to you, Kok Wen and Adam.
Okay, yes, welcome again everyone to our panel session today. So I think just to kick off, our first discussion point, I'd like to ask this first to Miss Amy, and then followed by Encik Muaz and later IRDA. So if there is a Johor Transport Master Plan, well, I'm not too sure if there's one. What do you think that we need to include, to ensure a better transport planning over the next 10 to 20 years for the state of Johor? So I think I'll let Miss Amy address this first.
Hi, everyone. It's good to be here. Thanks, Adam, for the question. I know we're running a bit late, so let's get straight to it. Regarding your question, I think the question should be, should there be a Johor Transport Master Plan? And I think everyone knows the answer. It should be a yes. As to what the Transport Master Plan should comprise, I think perhaps let's consider what's next after the completion of the RTS, right? So I saw earlier there was the presentation on the IRT. So these extension and feeder lines, I guess they are very good to disseminate traffic and to connect the entire Johor Bahru conurbation. That would be good. But perhaps also one consideration is the funding for this Transport Master Plan. Very important for Johor Bahru is actually the connectivity to Singapore. I think we all saw over the past weekend when there was the Merdeka celebrations, together with coinciding with the presidential elections. And then, of course, there was that viral article, 9 hours on that connection. Oh, okay. I know how terrible it is, actually, because I got stuck on the Wesak Day, the Singapore Wesak Day traffic. I left Singapore at 5 a.m. and I only reached Medini I crossed Tuas. I only reached Medini at 11 a.m. So it was quite bad, but apparently everyone takes this in stride. You see people walking up and down to go to the toilets. But anyway, that's beside the point. I think the important thing is that the connectivity to Singapore, between Johor Bahru and Singapore, is the key bottleneck, the key solution to everything. Also, besides consumer traffic, the holidays, there's the smooth flow of heavy vehicles across the causeway. That's very necessary for smooth economic flow. So besides having the RTS, I'm thinking that there may be a need to propose another connection. There was once, many, many years ago, on and off, there will be a discussion about a third bridge, but perhaps a walkway even may be considered within that Transport Master Plan. Essentially, it's to clear all bottlenecks because this pathway is a very busy pathway.
All right, maybe we can hear Encik Muaz's thoughts on this.
Yeah, I think I echo Amy's thoughts on that. Right, the connection with Singapore is what we're looking at, especially after hearing Rudy and Mrs. Gan's explanation on the infrastructure being planned already and launching quite soon, in time for the RTS, for the buses and all that. So, and the trains. So that's great. So I think on top of that, I guess we have to look at, for us, we'll probably consider angles from the urban mobility point of view, walkable city. The IIBD kind of zone should be accessible, freely accessible. right? All the way from Singapore down to the RTS, down to Komtar, and the rest of the districts that we have laid out in the master plan for IRDA, right? So that activities can thrive, right? So I think that's probably the additional perspective I can give.
Sorry, yeah, maybe we can hear thoughts from Encik Rudy, but of course, on top of what the discussion points that I've posed, maybe for Encik Rudy also, perhaps from IRDA's point of view, what do you think about the proposed Johor Bahru LRT, and whether or not you guys have, probably had some, discussions already, ongoing? Yeah, so yeah, maybe Encik Rudy or Mrs. Gan can talk about that.
Thanks, Adam. I would like to add a little bit more on what Muaz mentioned just now about walkability. Perhaps this new public transport master plan should also take a leaf from Iskandar Malaysia's comprehensive development plan. It talks about 20 minutes neighborhood, kejiranan 20 minit. Yeah, that really emphasizes on walkability, green mobility. It's not 20 minutes driving, okay? Otherwise it will still be the same. So 20 minutes walking and all that. Yeah. So so going back to your question on LRT, yeah. With our current existing public transport master plan for Iskandar Malaysia, we have looked at various modes of transportation, including rail. Yeah. So we've looked at monorail, tram, and all that. Now, one critical factor is density, population density. Yeah. To have a rail-based system, we need higher dense, area to make it more sustainable over long term. And looking at the growth area within Iskandar Malaysia is growing all the way from east to west, right? Cik Muaz, from Pasir Gudang to close to Pontian, and then we going all the way up to Sedana and all that.
Correct.
So with rail and our density is about 1,500 people per square kilometer. Klang Valley is about 6,000 plus, Amy, correct? Or probably high, Singapore close to 8,000 people per kilometer squared. So Iskandar Malaysia still needs to grow for a rail-based system to be able to sustain on its own. So by building IRT, this will be a basis for future alignments to be, matured, get the people used to, 20 minutes neighborhood and all that. Then building LRT will be I guess a no-brainer by then. Mrs. Gan?
Yeah, I think I agree to that. And I think the idea of the pedestrian walkway and maybe other mode of connectivity is also important. So in the master plan, I'm not sure, Rudy, right now we have a master plan, right? They actually several, but different people want to do, maybe different interests want to propose certain master plan. Yeah. Because in our discussion with the Joint Ministerial Committee for Iskandar Malaysia, this is the Malaysia-Singapore, we actually mooted the pedestrian walkway. But I think then COVID hit, we couldn't get the meeting, and somehow it is maybe right now there are other more urgent agenda on the plate besides the pedestrian walkway. So there was actually in discussion, and I think Rudy did mention about the ferry connection, which is some discussion have been ongoing. So this will actually be very good to add on the connectivity. Yes. And we also actually heard of some helicopter or the aviation, right, to connect to Singapore and whatnot. But these are all, maybe that one a bit far away. Yes, but they were conversation on the ground then. Yes.
Okay, probably just one more thing to to ask from IRDA side regarding this IRT. So in terms of whether it's the portions or the alignments, right? How much would you say is elevated and on ground? Because I was looking at the Kuching ART's proposed alignment. If I'm not mistaken, I think around 50 to 70% is elevated. So just wondering if IRDA could share on the elevated portion for IRT, and also for the benefit of us, right? You mentioned that the trunk routes, which we have more special buses, right? That is not a normal bus, right? I mean, just for us to be aware of, compared to the direct and feeder routes. Yeah. So I just wanted to seek some clarification from IRDA's side.
Okay. Out of 55 kilometers of those 3 trunk routes, right? Only 4% is elevated. Only 4%. Those places where we do not have enough right-of-way reserve from JKR, so we have to go up. Avoiding traffic conflicts, then we have to go up. So only 4%. Now, that brings down the cost tremendously. Yeah, that's number one. So your question number 2 is on the fleet itself. Yes, we are looking at a high capacity fleet for the trunk routes at least, because for RTS is taking 10,000 people, PPHPD per hour per direction. We have to support that at least up to 6,000 people per hour per direction. So for the trunk routes, we need to have high capacity buses fleet, the one that can carry 200, 250 at one time. Yeah. And with technology, with having information right onto your phones and all that, that really cuts down on the waiting time and all the hassle of waiting and all that. So yeah, Adam.
All right. Okay. Thank you very much, Encik Rudy. So perhaps I think we can move on to the next discussion point. Godwin?
Yeah, sure. Okay. These questions is more of a wish list question. Of course, the government has yet to officially announce the Johor Singapore Special Economic Zone. What do you think this SEZ should cover? In terms of location, where are the ideal sites, and as well as what are the economic sectors should they be focusing on? Perhaps, Amy, shall you take the lead first?
Thanks, Godwin. Special economic zone between Johor and Singapore. I got a bit confused, we Malaysians like all these abbreviations. But just recently, I think just now you touched on the fact that the government announced Forest City as a new special financial zone, right? So that is SFZ. And now your question is SEZ, right? So this, I don't know if it's the same or whether it's a subset. That's one question I was thinking out loud. So I'm walking through my thoughts, right, regarding this question. SFZ, SEZ, is it a subset? Is it the same or is it completely different? And then another question I have is also, where does Iskandar Malaysia sit in this, or do these two sit within Iskandar Malaysia? And then I remember a couple of years back, I think before COVID, somewhere in 2019, there was this talk about expanding Iskandar Malaysia into Greater Iskandar Malaysia, to include places like Kluang, Kota Tinggi, Pontian, Simpang, Renggam, I think. All these locations, that's what I heard. So whether or not this plan is still in place. So sounds like a lot of plans are actually there to actually grow Iskandar Malaysia or grow Johor Bahru in that manner. So whether or not all these will be compiled into one SEZ remains to be seen, but I guess someone is working on the plans. So back to your question as to what I think whatever this SEZ is, what it should cover. I think the geographical coverage has to be very clear. Whether or not there's an overlap between Iskandar Malaysia, Medini, or the greater Iskandar Malaysia, or even Forest City, and what the differences are. And then also, I think to take a macro view, right? This kind of SEZs are supposed to bring benefits to local businesses and not just focus on the foreign or Singapore companies. Definitely, it makes a lot more economic sense to set up in Johor because it's lower land cost, cheaper labor, essentially because of our fantastic currency exchange. But ultimately, right, SEZ, the Johor Singapore SEZ, will go head to head with the other economic corridors in Malaysia, macro view, right? Whether it's up north, whether it's East Coast, or even East Malaysia, or even Klang Valley itself, where everywhere there's an economic corridor there. Everyone wants a Tesla, a Dyson, the same. Every single corridor wants this. So the Johor Singapore SEZ, I think, must be very, very focused on the very special and dynamic relationship between Johor and Singapore. And this is what would set this SEZ apart from the other economic corridors within the country itself.
Right, yes, that's a very good point there. What about Encik Muaz? Yeah, what do you think?
Agreed fully, right? I think you said what we are all thinking. I kind of avoided talking about the economic zone in my presentation because of that reason, right? So and then you forgot about the renewable energy zones. There's another one, right? So I think agreed that all this must be aligned, right? We must have a clear view of which we actually have to comply with.
I think Moss seems to be frozen, right?
Yeah.
Hello?
Yes, okay, you are back.
Hello? I'm
Yep,
back.
we
Oh,
can hear you. Yes.
lost me, yeah?
Yep.
I was saying that I agree with that. And the last point I was agreeing to was the fact that it should benefit the local economy as well, so that they can participate in these new sectors and growth areas that we are encouraging, right? From the explanation that Mrs. Gan gave earlier on the existing efforts to encourage trade, investments, and collaboration, we know the areas already, right? And what we talked about today, RE, I think, is probably the big focus. How do we bring Malaysia to that next level, right? It does seem like a very good area for the country to focus on moving the needle for the country in terms of where we are in the global supply chain of something, right? And regionally, there's a chance here, like Amy mentioned, Singapore is the pathway for us to go to the international markets, right? And it can happen with energy, for example, if we get it right. So how do we encourage business like that? We've already discussed it today, so I don't think there's anything new. I also hear about some people in the industrial park space trying to figure out what else should come to Johor, and something curious that came up in conversations is space, right? Not curious, interesting for me, right? I mean, we actually have startups and technology companies, Malaysians, who are building small microsatellites, sending up, to provide data and information for businesses, and also linking up with global players, right? So, and again, Johor is a location close to the equator for apparently for launch sites, right? So there's lots of opportunities, right? So I guess agreed ongoing efforts and all the wide range of incentives must be clear to people coming in, and benefit the locals.
What about Mrs. Gan or Rudy? I guess you can collect a lot of feedbacks here.
Yes. So maybe I will start first. I think to echo what the panelists have actually mentioned, it is still work in progress. So maybe to summarize, the SFZ is a Malaysian initiative. But the SEZ is Malaysia and Singapore initiative. So this is the difference. So there are some things that maybe in the SFZ we can sit down together and say, okay, we want this. and then once government say, okay, we can do. But the SEZ, we really had to sit down, and we have, because IRDA is actually right now, we report to Kementerian Ekonomi under YB Rafizi. So there were really some discussion, several discussion actually, between the Kementerian and IRDA, as well as BPED, Johor, to see what are the things we want to bring in the SEZ. And we can hear that, I mean, we wanted, like say, how should I say, the high quality investment, what are the sectors and so forth. But sometimes it's not so easy to say, I want only sector A, because, the world is so wide outside. And sometimes even I think it's normal industrial park player, right? You have to see which are the good value investment you want to bring in. But we cannot be so specific on the sectors. But we are discussing right now, to see what are the good sectors to bring in, and so forth. Actually, one of the good collaborative industrial park that we have actually currently is actually the Nusa Jaya Tech Park, which is with CapitaLand in Singapore as well as Sunrise. But the special economic zone will go beyond this. And I think the details will be, the nuts will be in the details. What are the things and so forth. So from Malaysian side, we want to prepare what are the things that we do not want to be just, led by Singapore, but it will be a collaborative partnership, so that we at Malaysia side must know what we want, and we will, propose and be together and discuss and so forth. And I think taking Encik Mua's comment just now on renewable energy, we actually look at Johor having the opportunity to play a good part. Right now, there's already, I think, a solar park, maybe around 100 acres over near Kulai. And Johor has a lot of plantation land and a lot of white land, maybe not just Iskandar Malaysia, but beyond. So maybe one of the ideas that we are throwing about is, of course, the solar park cannot go into my special economic zone. Otherwise, it will be a huge area, to do for solar park. But it is possible that it can go outside but supply to solar park or something in that sense. And the green agenda, it definitely will be on the table when we want to talk to Singapore. Yes. And the idea, I think, that Malaysia now is in a good position, because, like you said, especially in the area of renewable energy, because we have the space.
Rudy, do you have anything to add, or you are fine?
Fine, nothing to add.
Okay.
Good points there.
Okay, so I think this next question, I would like Encik Muaz to address it. So, aside from being close to Singapore, Johor being close to Singapore, and of course, aside from having a lot of available land and cheaper electricity, how does maybe Johor compete with other areas in Malaysia, for example, Cyberjaya, to in order to attract more of these MNC hyperscale data center providers? Yeah, that's our question.
Okay, I think if you're comparing us as a location against other Malaysian sites, like North and Central region, power is one, right? Because I think the capacity to supply additional demand, if it was data centers in the central regions, maybe constrained or very limited already, right? So expanding that power supply for that region is tough. So we have, like you said, right, geographically we've got the advantage. On top of that, I think I mentioned earlier that we are understanding that business segment and their requirements on connectivity, right? So the fiberization is another point. Again, putting up another possibly terrestrial cable down south in Johor is a better bet than trying to do it in the central region because of the geography, because of the landscape and all that. That's two, I guess, right? But besides that, I guess you pointed out in terms of the advantages of availability of land, potentially cheaper cost. I don't think the power is cheaper here, though.
Okay, thank you, Encik Muaz, for answering the question.
Okay. Yeah. So let me pose the next questions to Mrs. Gan. The government has been trying to, attract MNCs in Singapore to locate some part of the business operations in Johor. So with all the incentives and connectivity in place now, it seems like we have all the right ingredients. What about the existing airport and seaport facilities? What is the utilization now? Do we have a need to upgrade this airports and seaports? And what else do we need?
Well, very, very deep question. Yeah. Maybe just as a preamble, right? As I mentioned earlier, actually Singapore is actually our second largest investor in Iskandar, Malaysia. So I think when government want to attract not just Singapore, but I would say all kind of investment, quality investment, the government is trying to attract or to bring into Iskandar, Malaysia and Malaysia in general. So in terms of incentive, and as I mentioned, sometimes it's not just incentive, but the ease of doing business, how proactive are the people on the ground to enable the project to land. So this is actually one of the ingredients. And I did mention the fast lane. So we talk of existing airport and seaport. Actually for Johor itself, the airport is actually privately owned, I think by the MMC group. And the seaport, if you look at our 3 ports, right? Port of Tanjung Pelepas and Johor Port are also part of MMC group. And Tanjung Langsat Terminal, I believe belongs to JCorp. So because these are private investment, what I understand is they are already planned for expansion. Because if you look at the Port of Tanjung Pelepas being the top 15 ranked in the world of ports ranking, yeah, they are already, what we understand is they are already in the midst of doing the expansion. And in terms of Senai Airport itself, additional flights are coming in. I think during COVID, some of the flights have just gave up. We were once before COVID very happy that we have a direct flight to Korea, via Jin Air. But sad to say that I think when COVID hits and no one can travel, so Jin Air decided I will not fly there. But we are still hoping. Hope is good. I think one of my ex-bosses said we still want to look for one direct flight to Japan. But as I mentioned, today Trans-Nusa will touch down first flight in Senai at 3 o'clock. So this will be new connection, and we want to encourage new connection to the airport. So these are passenger flight, because passenger flight will help to bring in travelers, including investors. So one of the connection that we have with Guangzhou, as I mentioned, China is our number 1 investor. In fact, we were trying to facilitate some of the travelers from China, and they were saying that they are based in Shanghai, so they literally have to fly from Pudong Airport to go to Baiyun Airport in Guangzhou, and from Guangzhou they will take the Asia. It will take them maybe 15 hours, but because we don't have a direct flight, but at least there is a connection that allows them from Guangzhou to go direct to Senai. And because Chinese investor need one-time visa. We were having a conversation to say, hey, if I want to land to Singapore, maybe faster, then if we don't need to have a 7-hour jam, I can come over in 1-2 hours, is nearer. But that need 2 visa, because to land in Singapore and another visa to enter Malaysia. So connectivity is very good. So I think improvement in passenger load. I think there's also discussion, how can we improve the freight load, from Senai Airport itself. So the plans, I think we are not able, we can only tell you hearsay, but maybe you should ask MMC when you next meet with them as a listed company. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Let's. It's up for it's almost lunchtime, right? 12:30. So let's proceed to the last questions for the panel discussion. This is to Amy. So, Amy, do you see further upside on Johor property prices? And for people like us, normal people, where should we buy now?
Okay, good question. And I've been asked this many times this year. And the answer is yes, I see upside because JB, like the rest of the country or the rest of the world, we all took a hit during COVID. So we are all coming back up from a pretty low point. So yes, there's upside. Definitely there's upside. But in Johor specifically, there seems to be a lot of exciting plans and activities taking place on the ground right now. There seems to be a buzz on the ground, which is very infectious, I think. So a lot of people are feeling positive news, feeling quite optimistic about what's going on in Johor. I like the fact that the government has many plans in place. They are talking about it, means they are working on it, which is great. So in terms of where should people buy, property prices are definitely coming back up and demand is back in certain areas in JB market. For example, in city center, due to the RTS, transactions have been happening because people are buying due to the potential to rent out properties to people who are trying to get out of Singapore. Also, the fact that there's a lot of hybrid work in place right now in Singapore. So that's why I said the connectivity is very, very important in order to grow the economic area in Johor Bahru, because a lot of workers, you don't have to be in the office 5 days a week. You only need 2 days a week, 1 day a month or something like that. So you could stay in JB and actually just make that connection a few times a month. Makes sense, right? And also it's so much cheaper in JB, of course. In residential areas, very suburban areas, like for instance, Tebrau, the recent high-rise launches in the Pandan Mount Austin areas, they seem to have pretty good take-up rates. NAPIC, the National Property Information Center, also shows that the overhang numbers are declining. So this is in line with the current uptick in demand on high-rise residentials. The prices are also more acceptable in the suburban areas like Tebrau, Skudai. It's about 400 to 650K for a typical 3-bedroom, 1,000 square feet built-up apartment. In terms of landed properties, developers are, of course, they like the Tebrau area very well. I understand that there are lots of potential land banking exercises, even for all the way further up to the Ulu Tiram areas. So with so much activity ramping up activities in Iskandar, Malaysia, I think this visible excitement on the ground is great. Just perhaps one note of caution to ensure that the policies still protect local Johorians, ensuring that we can still afford to buy properties there and not having to rent properties from foreigners who definitely can have higher affordability because of their strong currencies, right? But I definitely believe in the Johor Iskandar Malaysia story. It's a story that's very strongly intertwined with KL and Singapore's. So I was back then in 2014. I was there to see the very exciting 2014 tipping point in Iskandar Malaysia, and I am really very much looking forward to seeing what Johor can achieve in this next few years.
Okay, great, interesting. So let's search from iProperty website now, or not, we can always ask EcoWorld later after lunch. Okay, yeah, very interesting session from all the panel speakers here. Yeah, so now is lunchtime already, and I shall pass the floor back to our MC, Alia,